Okay, this is Parak Tes, Chelik Aleph, Parak Tes, Part 1, Chapter 9 in Chachmas HaKodesh in Oros HaKodesh of Rav Kook. So this part is called Hashalom HaPnimi, means the internal harmony. Now, this is really kind of like I would call this a paradigm shifting type of piece, in the sense that it's really, how do we say this? It's just kind of pointing out something a little bit obvious, I think, that is unfortunately not so visible, which is an interesting problem. Mesilas Yesharim, Path of the Just, as it's usually called in English, strangely. It talks about, that's the Ramchal's writing, he talks a lot about how there are things that are so obvious, they're just staring us right in the face, they're this close to us that we don't even see them, and those are usually the most profound perspectives and ideas. So here we have one of those, and that really is predicated on a basic assumption that we all make. It's a tenet of human existence pretty much at this point, that the world within which we live actually makes sense. I don't mean like events in our lives make sense, but that there's some kind of integrated set of rules that applies to things. What I mean by that is the entire field of science, all of the growth and technological advance that we see around us. Well, the assumption is that these things kind of like there's a logic to them. They make sense. They connect, and that as an example, the concept of electricity, we could measure it in different ways, and then we can use it once we determine kind of how it works. We can use it to do things, and we can build things that are based on the ideas we have. And the idea of building something is, if we know that metal has certain properties, and heat and gasoline and all these things, we can build a car out of that. And that's basically taking individual ideas and saying, oh, these ideas all can combine and connect through logical connections between them to create larger, more complex structures. And that's really like a given in how we talk and we try to figure stuff out. Problem solving, it's really very much embedded in the way we think about the world and about our lives and the things that we do here. And so that's a very important thing, because it's so obvious that that's how we assume the world works, and yet it's just something which is also a little bit scientifically, it's a little bit unprecedented. Like, why should it be that way? Why do things fit together? What's the reason why there's this organization of how? Not, I don't mean like, oh, who created it. That's more of the classic religious dogma side of things that people tend to like to talk about. I'm talking more about just the basic premise that we have, that we're like, well, since things have always been that way, so obviously it'll continue to be that way, and we'll just build more stuff and figure out even more because there's more to understand, when you really have no reason to think that just because it worked that way until now, we don't know what's going to be the next layer of understanding of reality, what quantum, mechanics looks like underneath, what's happening at the micro level. Like, we have no idea, and we don't know the answers to those questions, but we believe that whatever the answers are, they need to fit together with what we already know. And that's something which, again, seems obvious and feels true, but it's something which, how do we know that's true? So this piece is really about that, about the automatic structure that we all kind of assume exists and take for granted. And it has a few different implications which we'll try to see. So let's read a little bit. So Hashalom HaPnimi, that's the internal harmony. And it's really referring to the internal harmony between ideas and laws and aspects of the world and of reality around us. He writes, it's because of the narrow opening or aperture that a person has to receive ideas. That really lead koach hakibul, the ability to receive hatzar, that's narrow, asher la'adam, that a person has, that people have. Yedias soteres yedias. That means that different types of ideas, different things that we experientially perceive or understand about how reality works, different perceptions will contradict with each other. And we've spoken about this a little bit in previous videos in a different form, in terms of like the ideas of value of life versus how to relate that to, we should love everyone, everyone is special, and yet we have to have distinctions and separations that some people like to keep away. And these are different ideas that need to be kind of related to each other, because they're not really in harmony with each other. When do you decide to keep immigrants out? When do you decide that anyone should be allowed into your home because you should show love to all? These are questions that have very different answers for different kinds of people, because we all kind of have different ideas of where the ideas apply. So that's what he's saying. We have, because of our narrow way of thinking, or our narrow perspective, or our narrow opening to let ideas in, so ideas seem to contradict. The hargasha, and also emotional feelings also seem to contradict. Sadness and happiness, as an example. Tziyur, and different like structural ideas we have seem to not fit together. Like, this doesn't belong with that. I'm not really sure exactly what he means by that particular phrasing, but it's the same idea. The truth is that every idea, every perception, every understanding really kind of contains the other one. In other words, they kind of hold each other, and we're going to see how. And each feeling kind of like sustains or gives life to the other feelings. In other words, just to think of that as an example, it's a classic line people like to throw around a lot, which Rav Kook really, I think, in a lot of ways shows how profound this really is. In other places that he writes about it, is that it's the feeling of sadness and the feeling of happiness, they kind of need each other. In other words, you experience joy only because you've experienced loss. So the more loss you've experienced, the more the joy has almost like a platform for it to operate more fully. And the contrast kind of enhances each of the two of them. And it's really a much larger topic. And also, I'm kind of glossing over what exactly emotions are because that's also a fascinating discussion by itself, which unfortunately is very ill-defined, I think. But emotions are, they're so obvious. We all have feelings. So, of course, we know what emotions are. But feelings are complicated. They're intangible, and it's not really so clear what exactly they are. So here we're saying hargasha mechaya hargasha, v'tziyur mashlim tziyur, and really every schematic, diagram, picture, whatever, all the different pictures, structures, and ideas are all connected. Everything fits with something else. They complete each other. The more that a person kind of expands or evolves, or we'll call it grows, which is a little bit more of a vague but more common term, the more you expand, the more you mature, his tools also expand. His tools expand until he starts to really detect, like, wait, there's like a place for each thing. Like everything kind of has its place where it belongs, and they all kind of can coexist in harmony within me. You start to sort of pick up on that. Like, wait, like this kind of goes with that, and you start to figure out where things connect. And like, the word vehit amtan is a word like something is mat'im in Hebrew means it fits, like it's the fitting thing to do. So here he's saying the fittingness of these things with each other, of these different things with each other. You kind of start to uncover that and experience that. How it's kind of like as you get a little bit older, you'll notice as a random example. So young people are more prone to resorting to adversarial tactics to solve their problems. And a more harsh statistic is that a lot of terrorists, especially the Arab terrorists that are constantly attacking Israel, so a lot of them are young people who are between the age of 15 and 25. A lot of other types of violent crimes or violations of different kinds are perpetrated by young people, often males, which is a different discussion of what male and female is, but between the age of 15 and 25. Just to throw in, other examples, there's a phenomenon in Israel sometimes where some people I don't like to, but they want to make statements by lighting dumpsters on fire. I remember when I would read about that on the news, and inevitably it was young people who were just trying to make a statement, and they believed in something, which, they're expressing that in a very, I think, not productive, ineffective way. But the core reason why it's ineffective is really this point, which is an adversarial perspective. And again, there are times where being adversarial is kind of necessary, and it's also an important thing to discuss. But here what we're trying to say is that usually as people get older and they start to mature more, they realize we can actually get what we want and solve problems and create progress by harmonizing what it is that we want with what somebody else wants. Not just by compromising, like as if there's what I want pulling on what you want and we're pulling back and forth, but actually we can actually harmonize with each other and figure out how to get like a higher result, which is actually beyond what each of us was going to do on our own. That's really what the principle of trade is in economics, is that by trading with each other, we actually can get to a higher place, higher than where either of us was before, which is strange. How can we? It's like creating something from nothing, and yet because we each gain, so now we're able to do even more than we were able to do before. It's the magic of trade. For those of you who are familiar with that concept in economics, it's always fascinated me how you can. It almost seems like we're creating something from nothing. So that's what we're saying here. This expansion, it continues. Like you kind of start getting that as you get to a certain point of maturity, and then it just continues until that harmonization or that way of thinking in terms of harmonies really kind of penetrates all the way to the depths. To the point, like the root, of different concepts to the point where they really seem like they can't be resolved. You dig all the way underneath those things, And then Ad Kedei Ketef Eitan Shel Kodesh, that's the root of like the separation, let's say, between that which is beyond, that which is within. The idea of tangible and intangible, these are complete opposites. And how could they ever harmonize? I mean, it's crazy. Like, God is transcendent and we are physical. That's the usual terminology people like to use and throw around. And what we're really saying is that all of these complete opposite concepts, so they're actually not adversarial in that way. And when you dig deep enough and your mind opens enough, you see and learn and see how they harmonize. And that's really what this is saying. And that's called Shalom Apnimi. Umerov hadas apnimis, and the more you have this this internal perception, that kind of expands and spreads in the total structure. And he's really referring to the koma structure. Koma means the stature of, like this, the standing position of, like the word lakum. So really references the total structure of the intangible going down to the tangible, like we spoke about in the previous videos. So the more you spread that maturity in your structure as a person, that what it does is it kind of penetrates. The harmony is choder, from the word cheder, which means it goes into the space. Nokev, it cuts a hole, like the word nekeva. A nekev means a crack or an opening. The Oreda Natahom, it goes all the way down to the abyss, which means like the seemingly endless depth that is just impenetrable. Utahom Bechlal, and that abyss is also included in the penetrated space. In other words, you really get all the way. That's really the idea here of Shalom Pnimit, that you really figure out how to harmonize all things, even the things that seem like you'll never fit them together, and they really don't fit, and this is crazy and whatever. All things. And that's really a pretty bold claim if you think about that, because people like to throw, as we discussed in earlier videos too, people like to throw around the idea that things we can't understand, and these are questions that have no answers, but the Torah's claim and Rav Kook's claim is that we can describe all these things. Some of them cannot be verbalized because they are essentially intangible, and intangible things cannot be verbalized because verbalization, using words, is a tangible way of doing things. Your words can describe tangible things, but they cannot describe intangible things. They can never describe myself. I can describe my personality traits. I can describe things that I've done, but I can't talk about myself in a direct way. Through some of the things that I describe, you can maybe get an idea of what it is that I really am using your das, but you can't actually describe verbally things that are intangible. So here, so we're saying is that there's really this way to try to harmonize all of these things. So let's just go a little further. The path. How do you do this? How do you create this kind of harmony where all these questions now suddenly have answers, where we can actually relate to these things in a way that we, again, can't describe, but we understand them. We experientially see the harmonies. How do we do that? So he says, Zohi, this is the way. You start off at the time when the person is standing in a situation that is low, where the contradictions still, like, you feel them, like they're pressing into it. It's like, no, this is the opposite of that. It's an adversarial tension that's going on there. Because at that point there's two ways of looking at something. So those two ways, that's what we mean by adversarial. Like, instead of it being a harmonious one unity, you're like, no, there's this or that. There's transcendent, there's physical, and there's not physical. There's things that are kodesh and chol. There's things that are like, there's me and there's you, and we are just opposites, and we're not the same. And we're adversaries. We have an issue. I think that I'm pro-Trump and you're pro-Hillary, or I'm Democrat and you're Republican, or each of the different types of things. Like, there's all these adversarial approaches, and so that's where we start off. And there's really two different ways there. But there, one of the ways is kind of like above the other one, and we're going to see what exactly that means. Is that there really is a hierarchical or a structural relationship between positions and ideas. In other words, if I say that I'm pro-life and you say that you're pro-choice in regards to abortion, so these are they seem to be two opposite ideas at first glance. And if you're very pro-choice and I'm very pro-life and we're arguing, so then we're going to be on opposite sides of the table. But see, really, being pro-choice is actually a subcategory of being pro-life. Because being pro-choice means that you actually believe in people's ability to self-determine, to create their own lives the way they want, which is really a form of being pro-life. My life matters. It's special, and therefore I should be able to use it for what it is that I'm meant to do. I shouldn't have to give up my life for something because I want to do something special with it. But the question is, how far does that go? So there's a big category called pro-life, And then there's like an area where we have to start figuring out, well, are there some situations in which there are choices you can make that seem to maybe violate that in some way? Or there's ways of interrelating these things. And you can also kind of look at it the other way, but we're going to just use it as an example for now. So, Yesh Asher Yediah Soseres Yediah. There is a situation where you have one idea that's contradicting another idea. Sholelas Osel Legamre. It seems to negate the other one, which again is an adversarial situation. Because now it's me and I'm disagreeing with you, and you're wrong and I'm right. So there's no value to you because you're just wrong. So that's the idea of sholelet. It's negating them. It's until the idea that is contradicted from the strength of the idea that is bought into, in other words, the idea that I think. So it basically makes that the other idea is as if it's, which is the contradicted idea, as if it's non-existent. There's no value to that. As if all of its ideas, all the facets of that contradicted idea are empty and just nothing. And there's a situation where through negating one idea of the other, you can almost like, the word mitamtzot is the word tamtzit, which means like the essence of, like the distilled essence of. So we're saying that the negated idea's essence kind of becomes essentialized into like a distilled form, and then it gets almost like absorbed inside of the idea that you actually bought into, that you think is the right idea. And then listen to the interesting thing which happens, and this goes on inside of us all the time. This is literally mechanics of how to understand conflicts and to understand how ideas operate inside of us and how we tend to polarize and argue with each other, and how to stop doing that and actually understand truth instead of just deciding that I want to look at it one way versus another way. And even though it seems like in terms of the mechanics of it, the actual brain situation, what it is that you're thinking and your ideas, it looks like you're saying that other idea is just wrong and I have the right idea. But its truth is that on the inside, you actually, not only are you not negating the other idea, you're actually strengthening it, building it, and you are now acquiring it as well. So in other words, this just to explain what this means, is that when you argue with somebody else from a place of vikuach, like we spoke about in the last video too, like if we're adversaries and I'm saying this and you're saying that, and we're opposites, we're adversaries, so by definition, what I'm doing is I'm also taking in your idea in an essential way. And the reason why that is because really everybody knows that the other person's idea also has its place. In other words, there's no person who thinks that only what Republicans think is the right thing and the Democrats are completely wrong. Even though just as an example, I was listening to a radio show recently of a person who's very, very pro-Democrat, very leftist in a lot of ways, using the labels of the modern culture today, and very, very anti-Trump, obviously, and a lot of other Republican names. And there was a statement that was made about how all Republicans, how they're just anti-democracy, and very, very extreme statements. Now, I'm thinking to myself, like, this person doesn't really think that because no one on the inside actually thinks those things. What they're doing is they're operating in this way. They're basically operating from an adversarial place. Why each person decides to do that and when they decide is a fascinating question, which is kind of a person-to-person specific, reason. But basically, that's what they're doing. They're operating from an adversarial place, and they're basically saying that way is wrong, and this is the way that is really the right way. But the thing is that by having an adversarial discussion about somebody else like that, where your passion is being aroused in that way, and you're like, they're really wrong, and like this is the right way. So what you're doing is you're giving a lot of attention and thought to like the two sides that are going on, and their idea, essentially, what you're really doing is like they're separate from you, the other people who you're fighting against. You're trying to say to yourself, really, on the inside, those things that I think that they don't think, and that they do think, and that I think are wrong. I'm really seeing that in myself. In some way, I kind of relate to that. I know there's a certain part of me that kind of like connects to it, and I'm trying to push away from it. I kind of do relate to the idea of whatever it is the other person's view is, and I'm going to be like, no, I'm the opposite. I'm not like that. I don't want to be like that. But and that's what's funny about all kinds of arguments like that. Whenever you get in an emotional argument with another person and you're calling them out for their wrong view, what you're really doing is you're showing us, anyone who's watching, you're showing us what it is that you think, what is it, the ideas that are within yourself that you're rejecting. There are aspects of your own ideology that you, and your own perspective that you're actually rejecting, and you're saying, I don't think this is not good. This is bad. That's why there's a line that people like to throw around sometimes, which is, who are you telling that to? Are you telling me that you think that, or are you really trying to tell yourself? And when someone is emotionally self-expressive, they're yelling at somebody else and saying, you shouldn't do that. What they're really showing, and again, it could be even that the other person is doing those very things that are not good to do and that are bad and whatever. But the fact that you have an emotional investment on the other side, and you're saying it's this way, not that way, shows us that that other side is actually a part of you, and that you're trying to reject it or eviscerate it from yourself and get rid of it, and by basically projecting that out onto somebody else, the same way that you actually think about yourself in that same way. And so by passionately doing that, what happens is you're actually, in a way, you're strengthening that, because you're relating to an aspect of yourself. You're being like, I hate this aspect of myself, it's wrong, it's not good. But by giving it that level of attention, you're actually saying this is something which is important in my life. You're giving it context. And so even though you're fighting it and you're arguing with it and you're rejecting it mentally, but that actually enhances its presence. It's kind of like, if you yell at somebody else or say, that person means nothing to me, like if someone is mean to you and you try to push them off, like you know that it's going to stick with you. It's going to trauma, like the memory of that stays, because when you get upset at somebody, so then it stays with you. That's really what we're saying here, is that idea that you fight against from a contradicting place, that's really what you're doing. You're creating a little bubble within yourself to include that rejected idea. And as you grow older and you kind of get past the situations and the emotions of those things, you start realizing, you know what, there's obviously different aspects to this. Like, it's not that like this other person is like pure evil because they disagree with me, or like that this person is really doing a horrible thing. It's just that there's different ways of looking at things, and this is what their rationale is. And maturity happens very often as you get older, because you have new experiences where you actually experience something similar to what that person was going through, and then you react similarly. You're like, oh, that's what they were feeling. That's why they thought that. And now I understand why someone would react that way. And then it's like that approach, like I relate to that now. I see kind of like how that fits. And like I relate to it because I've also felt that way. It's just that I didn't understand what they were going through, and I didn't understand when is it valid to feel like that. So that's really what we're saying here. That's how you begin to harmonize, by deepening your experience and deepening your understanding of the underlying motivations of yourself and other people. And that creates this harmony where seemingly oppositional ideas suddenly each have their place and each belong. So it's true also in terms of feelings and just general, again, I'm not sure. Tziyurim seems like it's a pretty important word here, but I'm really not sure what exactly it is adding. Until you get to the point where the depth that you are how deeply you are pulling out the essence of the opposition, where your knowledge of what it is that you actually, the ideas you buy into, the sides that you're on, really start to draw a lot of essence or ideas from the other side, the opposite side. And then when you do that, when you start to really be able to see the other person's view, and that really gives you empathy for them, it really also helps. It really essentially means you're giving empathy to yourself, because you really also know when you get in an argument with somebody like that, and you're like, no, it's not this, it's not this. You know that there's a part of it that is true, what they're saying. You feel that, and you feel a little bit bad or like unbalanced that you're so vehemently against what they're saying, because you know in a way there is a place and application for that. And so by actually tapping into that, it's like it's a self-acceptance that you're doing, where like you can actually learn to feel empathy with yourself. And there's a lot of different examples of that, where we have issues, insecurities, things about ourselves that we don't like, that we then reject in others when we're really just angry at ourselves or rejecting parts of ourselves, when we eventually learn to accept those things, those aspects of ourselves, and which happens by learning to sort of see the underlying depth under another person's manifestation of those same things, or in our own selves as we mature, that you really begin to empathize with you as you empathize also with others about those types of things. So as you do that, the whole overall perspective that you have just deepens and broadens. It brings you to a very high space. You can kind of look down and see from a very high place where all the things go, like on the landscape. Shehu omek hashalom b'chichlulo. That's really the like the fully upgraded or fully integrated depth of harmony. Until all the different separate things, it's like the theory of everything. All the parts fit exactly where they belong in one, bundle, an organically integrated bundle. Each part completes every other part. There's no real breaks or rejections of one part of another part, and you just know where each thing goes. So the question, arises. So what's more important, pro-life or pro-choice? Well, those are both really important things. You have to figure out, well, how do we measure when does each one apply? And you have to be able to look at each individual situation, and the organic dynamism of every situation will help you to figure out, okay, well, I see that it applies this far, but not that far. And that's really what the Torah is supposed to be, an organic and dynamic integrated perspective that is constantly evolving or flowing to help you understand how to evaluate reality, because you have this giant map that includes all the parts, a descriptive map that not only relates to the physical things you see, but all of the structures, all the intangible down to the tangible. So if you see, the question of pro-choice versus pro-life as an example, well, the question is a baby is not just an animal, it's not just a body. There's a whole structure going on there. The question is, well, what is the structure, and what is a baby, and what is the difference between a baby and an adult? And these questions have very, very profound qualitative answers that are not just, well, it's like a small adult, but it's not really a baby. We don't really know. Like, it's not fully a child. Like, oh no, it kind of is. Like, these are all very primitive, immature, I would say, even terminologies, when there's a whole system describing these things in a very profound way. The halachic ideas that we usually talk about with psak of halacha, of things like that, of abortion questions. So that's just the externalities. It's like, what do you do? But what do you do is completely predicated and built upon the underlying perception, the underlying structures that we're describing here. And he ends off with one of his poetic pieces. Ashrei Am Shechel, praises the nation that is like this for them, that they have this kind of way of thinking, that they have this level of depth and harmony, which, we don't really all have that so much nowadays. We have a much more fragmented perspective. Ashrei Am Hashem Elokav, Ashrei Am HaYodeh La'akir Es Adon HaOlam. That the people who are able to recognize that the master of the world in this way, master meaning here like the bird's eye view that sees all the parts. Melech Shalom Shalom, that's the person who sees all the harmonies. That's Hashem, having the complete perspective that we're constantly evolving towards that. Merov Oneg Abba Sharhu es Shir Yididus Abba Batanugim Shir Shirim Asher Shlomo, which is really Shir Shirim Asher Shlomo. The idea of a song is again that concept of harmony, and Shlomo is the person who's supposed to be, like from the word Shalom, is the bringer of harmony in the world. That's what he was for a large part of his life. That's what he was supposed to be. Towards the end, it didn't work out so well. But that's really what Shalom Pnimit means, is the ability to harmonize all these opposite dynamics. So we're going to keep building all these concepts with each other, but that's basically this section, which is Perek Tes. Okay, let's see you in Perek Yod.